Would you please introduce yourself?
My name is Doug Lawrence. I'm a World War II veteran. My wife Mary Alice and I live in Raytown, Missouri, and have for about 40 years. I had about almost 2 years experience of World War II, so this is what I'm talk to you about and presenting to you that you might be interested in. And my war experiences actually began in high school. I was attending Shawnee Mission High School, which is now Shawnee Mission North, class of 1944. We registered I think in March of that year in Olathe at the courthouse there. And I remember leaving basketball practice to go down there that day and enroll. And one of the reasons I remember is because I played on 2 state championship teams there in 43 and 44. And my coach wasn't too happy about me leaving, but I had no choice. So I went down and registered. We graduated on, I think, May the 20th, and the next day I reported to Fort Leavenworth for processing for entering the Army. And after about a week there and going through the usual processing, I went to Camp Hood, Texas, now called Fort Hood, which was, I believe at that time, the largest infantry training camp in the country. About 165,000 men were on duty there at the time. And we were supposed to spend 4 months in basic, but you went through everything. You're learning about weaponry, of course, and Army regulations and combat techniques. And I remember how hot it was. It was 118 degrees on the tarmac the day we landed at Fort Hood. The sergeant says, "You boys want to see if you're in good shape. Get down there and do some push-ups." So we all had to do 10 push-ups, and believe me, there were some guys that couldn't do it. So we're going to get you boys in shape. And that they did. But we went through about 3 months. What happened down there was they cut us short by about a month because apparently they needed replacements in Europe. Now we were supposed to be training for the Pacific. And the training would have been the same, but we were cut short and got orders to report to the European theater. And so we got about a week at home, a little before Christmas. And then we reported, we flew, in fact I flew on a plane to Fort Meade, Maryland. Checked in to go overseas, went to Camp Kilmer, New Jersey, and processed there. And then we went out to sea on the Queen Elizabeth, which at that time was just about the world's largest ship. It had been a passenger ship that had been changed into a transport ship. And there were 15,000 men on that ship going overseas. I remember going into the back of it through a whole sort of a big drawbridge that you went across into the most huge opening in that ship in the Brooklyn Navy Yard. And from there we went across the Atlantic. We crossed the Atlantic in about 4 days because that ship is very fast and powerful. And of course a lot of the guys said, what about German submarines? Are they around? But at that time in the war, thank goodness, German submarines were pretty well taken care of. And they said they had never had a problem with it. And I remember one night, it was hot going over, although this was in December and very cold. We followed the Gulf Stream. And we hit to the North African coast. And we were shipped off of Casablanca. And that night, as we turned north to go toward Europe, we passed the Queen Mary, which is a sister ship of the Queen Elizabeth. And it was also under blackout. But you could see it in the shadow just crossing in the night, huge. And you got some idea how big the ship was you were on. And we went up through the English Channel, up through the Irish Sea, and landed in Scotland. And we were about a day or two on board there. Then we trained up in Glasgow, Scotland, and came down across England to London, and which is also under blackout. And I remember on some of the stops, we stopped at one town in Scotland, and a lot of the women from the apartments came out with muffins and food for us and gave it to us on our way through, which we thought was really great. And the same thing happened in England when we crossed into England. But we went through some of the big towns on the way down to Leeds and Birmingham, and of course we were under blackout, but you could see out, and a lot of soldiers, British and Scottish soldiers, and American GIs, all training in England at that time. We got into London, and I'll never forget, we got there during the night. And the English conductor came in and said, "Now lads," he said, "please remember the Jerry's," that's what they called the Germans, "are throwing in these big rockets. We're getting hit with those. Now we'll be quite all right if we don't get hit with one of these." And sure enough, one went off just as we were leaving London to go down to Southampton on the coast, and the chain just jumped. You could hear the huge explosion. Those things were that V1 rocket, and they were very big and powerful. And they got heavy casualties in London at that time because of it. Well, we got down to